Today's scripture reading brings us to 1 Samuel chapter 3. Now, 1 Samuel chapter 3 finds little Samuel there at the tabernacle, the temple, and he's in bed, and he hears a voice. And the chapter is pretty straightforward, so I'm not going to go through a lot of explanatory type things. What I do want to mention is just a couple things that I think will help you. The first thing is I want you to see Samuel's persistence. We see time after time after time, the voice of the Lord comes unto Samuel, and Samuel gets up and he goes to Eli because the Bible tells us he doesn't know the voice of the Lord yet, and the only other option would have been Eli. And so Samuel gets up and he goes to Eli and he says, "Yes, sir. Can I help you?" Eli says, "I didn't call for you. Go lay down." Now, after this happened the first time, Samuel responded the second time. That's logical. But after Eli tells him time and time again, "I did not call you," and Samuel keeps hearing this voice, it would have been very easy, especially if Samuel was anything like me back in the day, to just ignore it and continue sleeping. I don't know what's going on, but, good night. And go back to sleep. Now, here's the thing. Had Samuel done that, would he missed out on the blessings of the Lord? I think a lot of times God is trying to get our attention, and he tries, and for whatever reason we miss it, and then we begin to ignore it. And we do that at our own peril. I'm glad that Samuel didn't ignore it, but he was persistent in continuing to get up and go ask, because had he not, then he might have missed God. Now, the second thing is that I want you to notice, I have this chapter broken down into two sections. The first one is verses 1 through 18, and that is the Lord appears unto Samuel. And we're continuing in that. I have one more point, and it's found here in the latter part. Now, after the Lord speaks to Samuel, he tells him what he is going to do. He's going to cut off the house of Eli, and he gives reason in verse number 13. And I want you to see Eli's sins of omission. Eli's sins of omission. Verse number 13 says this, "For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knoweth, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not." Now, Eli knew this, and we saw the light rebuke that he gave his children in verse number 2. But the problem is, Eli was in a position to do more, yet he didn't. He could have said, "Hey, boys, you are not serving in the tabernacle. You have no right to serve in the tabernacle, serve God doing all this wickedness in which you do." But he didn't do that. And it wasn't as if Eli himself was out doing wicked things. All he did was he didn't do what he should have done. It was a sin of omission. And Eli's sin of omission not only doomed his sons, but it damned his house. It's really amazing when you think about that. Eli didn't do anything in particular, but because Eli didn't do what he should have done, it doomed his sons. Now think about that. I wonder if his sons would have been killed, if the Lord would have taken them, if Eli would have brought judgment down on him instead of forcing the Lord to have to do it. Doomed his sons and damned his house, simply because he did not do what he should have done. So many of us Christians, we think that as long as we're not sinning outwardly, that we're doing okay. But the fact of the matter is, sins of omission, to him that knoweth to do good doeth it not, to him it is sin. Those sins of omission are just as important. Sometimes, if not more so. So we'll notice that here. The last section is verses 19 through 21. And I have that titled, "Samuel Grows in Favor and Renown." And in these few verses, it sums up the remainder of Samuel's young adult life. These few verses would span several years. I don't know how many exactly, but several years in the life of Samuel. And it just simply talks about how he grew, and he grew in wisdom and stature in the sight of God and man, and that's it. Chapter number 4 will catch us up with the finality of what had been leading up to it at this point. So that's 1 Samuel chapter 3, and I hope this has been a help. God bless, and we'll see you in the next video.